Okay, in the last video we set up a walk system and we also set up dying. Now let's focus on the shooting part of it. So to start, first thing we need to shoot is a gun. I have found a gun model somewhere online. I've also put this gun model in your Blackboard so you guys can feel free to use it. But try and find a different gun model, something that you do want to use. But if you can't find anything, there's always this one available. So to start, I'm just going to drag this gun model in and import it. Import it. This gun model doesn't need a skeleton, so make sure we clear that and hit import. Now, honestly, I should have made a folder for these guns rather than just putting it in here. So let me just do that real quick. Alright, so we just moved the guns into their own folder and we have downloaded this gun model. So to attach it to the player, we can't just go into our BP pawn and add it as a static mesh. And, we can parent it here. And this looks fine. This looks kind of right. Again, it's understandable that this doesn't work completely for us, considering this character and this gun model weren't made for each other. Ideally, we'd have a modeler and an animator put these things together that everything fits. So it's understandable that things don't fit perfectly for us. But we can't use the static mesh just like this. If you're looking right now, you could see that even though this this gun is parented to the mesh, it's not moving with the character. They're breathing. You can see their arms moving up and down, but it's not moving with them. If I was to just play this now, whenever it responds, we can see that, my character is moving their hands, but the gun isn't moving with them. The gun is static, as the name suggests. So we can't just directly add the gun in and parent it. We got to do something else. And what we got to do is we got to set up a socket. A socket is something we put on the bones, and then we can attach static meshes to the sockets, and then they follow the rotations of the bones. They'll follow the animations of the bones. Let's take a look at that. So we need to open up our skeletal mesh. So under Remy, we have Remy skeletal mesh. Let's just open them up. And let's go to the skeleton. I am going to parent the gun to his right hand. So we can pick the bone we want to parent it to. So I'm going to parent it to this right hand. And all I got to do is right click on the right hand bone and add a socket. We can add a socket here. We can click on the socket, and I'm just going to move it a little bit so that it kind of matches his palm rather than his wrist. Just like that. And we can fine tune it again back in our player blueprint, so we don't have to get it right just here. Go back to the BP twin stick. So we have our gun here. And now where it says parent socket, we can click this little folder icon with the magnifying glass. And we can select the new socket that we made, right hand socket. We can also just directly parent to the bones, but sockets let us, customize just the position a little bit. So we can socket it there. It moved because my location wasn't 0, 0, 0. Then we want to rotate this gun. And finally just move it forward, or just move it so, it vaguely fits where I want my character to be holding it, which... I think that's good. Again, the model and the mesh weren't, the character and this mesh weren't made with each other in mind, so it's understandable that things don't completely fit. And this will probably be true for any of the meshes that you guys find. Also, this mesh does not have the bottom of this barrel area here, so I'm not sure why. Again, this looks better, and really the point that we're trying to get to is that now this animates with the character. So if I was to play it now, when my character moves their hand, we can see the gun moves with it. So when they move, the gun comes up. When they go back down, the gun comes down. So the gun has been socketed to them. It plays with the animations that they have. So even when I play our dying animation, our gun kind of, our player is holding it when they die. It looks good rather than just staying there. Again, just to reiterate, we don't need to worry about the fact that it isn't matching completely because we are just finding random models online with a random animation. So things aren't just going to fit well together. But if it looks good enough, it's good enough for this class. So we have that ready. Let us actually get the shooting controls to work. And what I want to do when our player shoots is, again, play an animation. So let us find an animation that we want to play when our player shoots. In Mixamo, I just search shooting. You can even just search shoot, I'm pretty sure. And we have this rifle shoot animation. This, I think, is from the same pack as the rifle we're shooting. But I don't really like this one. I kind of want this one where he's shooting kind of like rapid fire. But if we look at this animation, the feet are at a completely different stance than in this one. And in fact, even this one wouldn't really work for us because the character is moving forwards when our character can move in all directions. And, I don't want to go around and look for this animation in forward, back, left, right, and idle. That doesn't really make much sense. It also doesn't give us flexibility. So we're going to use this animation. We're going to use a new concept of animations called layering, or blending by bone. In Unity, I believe it's called layering. But really, again, the concept to think about is in their bone hierarchy, their hips or their spine is somewhere here. I want this shooting animation to only play for the bones above this hip area. So for, the rest of their torso, their shoulders, his head, I want this shooting animation to only play there. The bottom half has to still play our running animation. So for doing that, we're going to use a concept of animation layering. To start, let's just download this animation and get it in our engine. Again, download it without skin. And when it's downloaded, we just have to drag it in. Make sure that the skeleton's selected and drag it in. This animation is called gunplay. I don't really like that for what we're going with, so I'm just going to call it shooting. And what we want, is to go into our animation blueprint. And we want to blend between not just our locomotion, but our locomotion and our shooting. And we want to layer this animation. So we can do that using a node called layered blend per bone. It takes a base pose and a blend pose, and it blends them together. So again, let's just real quick look at this and let's build it up to working as we want it to work. What we are going to do first is let's just make sure we drag in our shooting animation and set it to looping. Again, this is just for testing. Let us plug that into the blend pose. So we're going to blend into the shooting with the base pose being this animation. And let's toss this blend into the false pose. So the result of this blend is going to come into our blend by bool. And finally, for this, we're going to click this layer blend per bone. And under the layer setup, we are going to add a layer. And where it says bone name, we want to type the name of the bone where we want this animation to play above. I think it's going to be called spine. And now you can see he is in the idle stance down here. And he's playing the shoot animation up here. How did I know this bone was called spine? Well, that was fairly simple. In our skeleton, there's spine right here. And, it controls the top half. The parent of spine is everything in the top half. Below spine, we have our right leg and left leg. And connected to everything, we have our hips. So I want the part above his hips, the spine, to play the shooting. Everything below that to still play their old animation, which is running. And that's exactly what this layer blend per bone says. The base pose is locomotion. So everything is going to play but locomotion. Except we're going to blend the shooting pose. And what bone are we going to blend it in? Into spine. So everything spine, and that's a parent of it, they're going to play shooting. Everything else will be stuck with the base pose, which is running. Now when we play this, once it responds, you can see there's my character. They're playing the shooting animation. And again, the gun doesn't quite sit correct on the player. I'm actually just going to go ahead and while we're playing this animation here, before we fix the whole thing, just spin my gun around a little bit so that it fits our player. Oops, that's the wrong one. Okay, there you go. That kind of vaguely fits the player using their shooting animation. So now it'll look a little off when they're not shooting, but I think this looks better. Alright, so now we have this shooting happening. We have the shooting animation happening just constantly, but we don't want to blend it constantly. We actually want to blend it, just play it when we're holding the button down and we let it go. We want to go back to this layer blend. And we're going to use one more concept to do that, but it's not really a concept. It's just we have these things called animation sequences. Unreal has another type of animation asset called a montage. And so if I was to right-click shooting and just create, and from an animation sequence, just make an animation montage, the difference between a sequence and a montage is not too big. One of the main things is montages give us a lot more options to play with. And so we're just going to use that. So we have our shooting montage now. And these montages can be played in code. And montages are like one-shot animations. So, it's an animation that plays, and then Unreal will just take us back to our previous animation, whatever, we were playing. To use a montage here, all we're going to do, instead of calling this shooting, we are going to type in slot, default slot. And montages play in different slots. We can have many different animation slots that play a montage. And so just to give you one example of this, because this is a fairly Unreal concept, is imagine, we had a slot called emotes. We can only play one emote at a time. And emotes are montages in the sense that they play, they finish, and we go back to whatever our old animation was, right? We might be standing there with a gun ready and idle. We play this emote, we go back into this animation ready and idle. And so this animation montage will let us, so this animation plays out once, and then when it's done, it's going to send us back to our previous pose, which is the source over here. So we have a source. That source is going to, be playing. When we fire off a montage, that source is going to blend into this montage, and when it's done, we're going to go back to the source. And that's how we're going to use this here. This default slot group, we know that our shooting montage is in this default slot. It says it's there. In fact, you know what? Let's just make a new slot for this. Let's just make a new slot for this. And to do that, we come down to slot, just by this default group, open slot, open the slot manager, which will open up here. And we can just add a new slot. And I'm going to call this, shooting slot. And we can think about this slot to play the different shooting montages for our different weapons. We'll play a different animation for a rifle fire, bazooka fire, pistol fire, and this slot would house those animations. So let's use this new slot instead of using default slot. Go into slot, And then slot name, I'm just going to change it to the shooting slot. Now, when I go back to our twin stick, we can delete this, and then we can do shooting slot. I'm not sure why that. Maybe compile slot. I see. Okay, we have to add the default slot, and then up here where it says slot name, there we can change it to our shooting slot. Okay, so now whenever we run this animation code, which we're going to see, we want to, it's going to run, if we run the shooting animation, it's going to play this slot up here, which is going to run into our output graph. So let's plug it into our blend pose. Our source is still going to be the locomotion, but as you can see, I can only plug in locomotion to one place, and I need it plugged into both. So what we can do for that is cache our locomotion. We can come up here, type in cache. It says new save cache pose. Let's do that and call it locomotion pose. And then we just need to call this to use it. So we just right click and search use cached, and there you go. So all this is just this basically kind of turned into a variable. Caching is just another kind of synonym for saving. So we are just taking this locomotion, we're saving it as we're caching it as an animation, we're saving it as an animation called locomotion pose, and we're just using that here because we can now use this more than once. Okay, so right now everything should be back to normal. When we play our game, our character should just run around without playing the shooting animation. And when we run our game, they can move, they can walk around, but we don't have the shooting set up yet. So we need to actually get that to work. And we do that in our blueprint. We are just going to run. We have a shoot function already. We have our IA shoot. So we are going to use that to run our shooting function. So I'm going to come back in my graph, and I'm going to add my input action shoot. And we have this triggered, we have completed. So the way I want my shooting to work is when I'm holding the left mouse button down, I want my character to keep shooting. And when I let go of the left mouse button, I want my character to stop shooting. So it's going to be an automatic weapon per se. We're going to keep running the animation when our character shoots, and when they stop shooting, we want to stop playing that animation. We want to, only go back and play our walking animation. We don't want to play the shooting montage anymore. Let's just real quick take a look at this input action to see how we could accomplish that. If you think about our debug actions, there's a press and released. So this would be fairly simple. When I'm pressing and holding left mouse or T, it's just going to go through pressed. When I release it, we'll release it. It's not quite the same here. We have quite a few things going on. So let's print some strings to get an understanding of how this works. I'm going to use, when it's triggered, I'm going to use click, and on completed, I'm going to print string released. Let's go back to our level and see what this looks like. So I'm going to click and hold. It is constantly clicking. And when I release, it releases once. What I want really is for when I click, just like this T, I want it to just fire once rather than a bunch of times. And then when I release, I want it to fire again, the completed. And let's go look at our input mapping context for that. What I can do is open up shoot and open up the left mouse button. If you're using a gamepad, you would have to do this on your gamepad as well, but I'm just using the left mouse button. we are going to add a trigger to it. Remember, a trigger is going to affect how that trigger state, how that trigger event fires. And instead of leaving it at none, I am going to do pressed. And if we read pressed, it says trigger fires only once when the input exceeds the actuation threshold, which for a binary button that's either on or off, there is no threshold, so it'll just fire when I click the button. Okay, so now I've put this trigger pressed. It says it's only going to actuate once. When I clicked the button before, we had clicked constantly printing. Now when I click it, it prints clicked and released. Because when we click it, the click function runs, and it's also completed because we're only going to run it once during that click. To avoid that and also have a release happen, I'm just going to add another trigger to it, and this one's going to be the release trigger. So now I click the left mouse button, I'm holding it, it says clicked. When I let go, it says clicked, and then it says release. So there is one downside to this way of doing it, that is that it's going to run the clicked event one more time as we release it. But for what we are doing, that should be fine, and that shouldn't really bother us in our context. And so all I need to do now that we know this clicked and released works, is I'm going to get my mesh and get the animation instance. And we're going to call a function called montage play. There might be a function that you see that says play montage. We are not looking for that, specifically montage play. So on triggered, I want to play the shooting montage. And on completed, we're looking for montage stop. And on completed, I want to run this montage stop. And make sure we select the montage to play, shooting montage. Let's go test it. So we'll go back to our level, and we click, and nothing is happening. He's kind of moving. Oh, I think I know what it is. Okay. We got one small thing. We need to set this montage to looping. We can do that by going here, typing loop. It's already looping here. We also need to loop it in the montage section here. So we click on this montage section. You can see it runs default. And then we click this little box here that says pick the next section, and we just pick default. You can see it turns into a looping icon. So now our montage is going to loop. So now when I hold it, you can see our montage loop, our players firing their gun. When I let go, they stop. I can even sprint into it. Great. So the last thing we want to do in our animation setup is let us just add some sound effects and add some particle effects to this. So in this gun folder, I'm going to first get a sound effect. I already have a sound effect downloaded, so I'm just going to use that. I will just drag the sound effect here and let it import. And also, I would like to get a particle effect. I don't have the default content pack. I'm not even going to find a particle effect. Just for this, what I'm going to do is make a Niagara system, which is Unreal's particle system. And it has a bunch of particles that are already set up. And so I'm just going to take this directional burst. It's a template. Really, you're supposed to work on this, and make it your own, but it's not a particle class, and it's nice that we have these templates to use just for testing. So let us make this default burst lightweight, and I'm going to call it shoot Niagara shooting. All right, so we have a sound effect, and we have this particle effect, which is just a little spark kind of burst particle effect. So let us go ahead and get our animations to play this. The nice thing about playing particles and sounds with animations is we don't need to actually code much for it. We have our montage here, and you can see that I can run my playhead through it. All I need to do is we have this track here called notifies, and there's one notified track already. I can just right click on that where I want, add a notify, and we have play sound right here. So I add a play sound notify. Let's just play our sound. And what's very nice about this is when our playhead runs over this, you can hear it, it plays a sound effect. So when I play this, it's actually syncing the sound to the speed of the animation, because I get to play this sound at the exact frame of the animation I want, which is pretty cool. Same thing with the sound particle effects. I can just, add a notify state, play Niagara particle effect, but the issue with this one is going to be, and we'll see this, so let me just add the shooting system. It is spawning at their feet. Really, I don't want that. I want it to spawn at the weapon. And so to do that, we need to we need to set that up in our player and apply a little bit of code to do that. So let's just get that part set up. So instead of using this notify directly that plays the Niagara effect, let us first delete that, and let's only keep the sound on. We're going to add a different type of notify. I'm going to go up to new notify, which is going to make a custom notify. And I'll call this shoot, or I'll call this notify shoot effects. And I'm just going to drag this over so it plays along with the sound. I'll make it actually a little earlier because technically the light should come out, be perceived faster than the sounds. Again, it's a game, none of this matters, but just make sure they're around the same spot. So the animation and our particles play at the same time. So we have this custom notify. It is called notify underscore shoot effects. Let's go back to our BP animation blueprint. And now let's look at the event graph. I'm just going to close everything else because I have a lot open. Let's look at the event graph. In the event graph, I can add this notify now. I just right click and I search notify, and I called mine shoot effects. There you go. Event anim notify, and then the name notify shoot effects. And it's just an event. This event's just going to run every single time we come here. And so I can use this event to spawn a particle, but really the particle spawning needs to be done in our player. So let's set that part up, and then let's set up the communication between them. So in the viewport, I want to spawn this particle on the gun's muzzle. To do that, I'm going to add a scene component. The scene component, it doesn't consist of anything. It's really just this transform. And where it helps us is it is going to let us center, or it's going to give us the location that we want to spawn the particle on. So I am just going to set this, this scene component to child of the gun, and then move it forward so it's vaguely on the muzzle. And really, I'm going to make a custom event here, or actually I'm not going to make a custom event because we need to talk between the animation blueprint and our blueprint. So I'm going to do this in my BPI. So we're going to make a new BPI function. And we can call this one shoot FX. Go back to our pawn. And all we want is to call the shoot. Well, actually, in our interfaces, we have shoot effects. Let's just add it in here. And here, we just want to spawn a particle system. And so we don't want the spawn emitter attached in location. I made a Niagara system, which is Unreal's new animation system. So we want to spawn it using that. So if I go to spawn emitter, or we want spawn system at location instead of spawn emitter. If I do spawn emitter, you can see I have no emitters because I don't have the old system of Unreal. They're old particles, which is called Cascade. The starter content came in with a bunch of Cascade particles, which is why we use this, but we need to use the other node for this, which is the spawn system node. So let's do that. Spawn system, and we're going to do spawn system attached. Plug it in. What system do we want to spawn? We want to spawn the Niagara shooting system, and we want it to be attached to this scene component and keep or snap to target, keep world scale. So whatever scale this particle was made at, let's keep it, and let's just snap it to the world, or snap it to the target, which is the barrel of our muzzle. And then all we need to do in our twin stick is with this try get pawn owner, let's call the same function. I think I called it shooting effects. We want the message, and let's pass the message along to our player. So now in this montage, when we reach this frame and this notify runs on our animation blueprint, this notify is going to run, which is going to call the shoot effects function on our player. What does that do? It just spawns an emitter into the scene component, and this scene component is attached to the barrel of this gun. We also want to make sure auto destroy is turned on, because this particle is just going to play once and then it should destroy itself. Okay, let's go see if this works. So we'll just go back into the game and hit play. Okay, so yeah, when I click, you can see the particles play, the sounds play as well. And visually speaking, our entire game has been set up. Now we can work on the logic for our game. In the next videos, we are going to set up the logic for our shooting, and then we'll begin working on the enemies. Thank you for watching.